One. Welcome. I bid you welcome to WASP Wednesday, episode number 1. I've been wanting to do this series for a long time. I just needed to find the right people to talk WASP with. And I got a seasoned friend here, and John the Music Nut that I met through the Contrarians, a fellow Pennsylvanian as well, as I'm originally from Pennsylvania, for those who do not know. Welcome, John the Music Nut, to my music corner. First time, I think, on my channel, if my memory serves me correctly. Second time.
Second
Concert
time
review, excuse me,
we did the
got
W.A.S.P
late.
concert review. Yeah.
It's this getting old thing. The
Yeah.
memory's kind of going fast.
Yep, we're in that. Pleasure to be here, John. Thanks for having me on. I've been really looking forward to doing this series.
This is going to be a lot of fun. What we're going to do is we're going to go through the discography. We're basically just going to have some fun with it. We're going to talk about history with some of it, maybe history of the albums. Who knows what we'll talk about. But this one, obviously, we're going to start with the first album right there, the one that started it all off on August 17th, 1984. Oh, the cassette. Yeah. That brings back so many. There you go. That brings back so many memories of that.
Yes, sir.
So I'm going to start first. John, give us your history. How did you first hear about W.A.S.P, and what are your memories? What are your memories of dating back to when you first heard about the band? Let's hear your history first.
Okay, thank you, John. I was 1984. I believe this album came out in September of 84, around there. But they played them a lot on a college radio station, WRKC Radio, King's College, out of Pennsylvania, in Wilkes-Barre, which was a few miles from where I grew up. And they played W.A.S.P on there pretty frequently. They played this album. They also played the single Animal on there a lot as well. And I got into them. I loved their sound. It was raw. It was rocking. Blackie had a wonderful voice that just took you in. And I heard these songs so many times. So back then I would ask for music for Christmas when I was a kid. And for my 14th birthday, I got this bad boy. Right. So, and I'm going to repeat a story that I told on your channel with the W.A.S.P live show reviews that we did. So my mom goes to Joe Nardone's Gallery of Sound, still go there, still love the show. I'm sorry, still love the store. But back then we had a store in Edwardsville, which was 2 miles from where I grew up. In fact, I used to ride my bike from Courtdale to Edwardsville to go pick up cassettes and CDs later on, and then just ride back home. And but anyway, my mom picked this up for me, and she goes, "Is this for you?" "No, it's for my son." And the cashier goes, "God bless your ears." She told me that when she gave it to me. And then after that, I mean, I really love this album. I haven't played it in a while. I'm curious. I got a little cassette player right over here. They'll be curious to check that out later, if this tape is warped or if it's still playable. I'm thinking it's probably close to warp because I beat this album to death. But yeah, but from here, and right around that time, I think late night, you would see the videos for I Want to Be Somebody, and Love Machine as well, but less often. But it was WRKC that really got me in. And also I was big into reading Circus magazine then, and Hit Parader as well. So that got me into the album. And when I first got it, I was hooked. I was all in throughout the 80s, I would say. But yeah, that was what got me into W.A.S.P.
Yeah, it sounds similar to me. I know I've told this story a lot, but I love telling this story. So it's it was a late January night. January, I want to say it was January 26th. So it would have been my friend Mike's birthday. And my two of my best friends in the world, Mike and Dave, we were supposed to go to a concert that night down in Bethlehem at the Stabler Arena. We were supposed to see Iron Maiden and Twisted Sister. But yeah, Maiden got a little sick, and there was like a run of 4 shows that got canceled, and ours happened to be one of them. I think 2 Radio City Music Hall shows got canceled too in that run, and so unfortunately, the show got postponed, and which we would eventually go to see later in the year in June at the Allentown Fairgrounds. With only this time it was with Accept opening up, so I didn't get to see Twisted Sister, which was a bummer because I really wanted to see Twisted Sister. But anyway, this is a W.A.S.P show. So anyway, so the 3 of us still decided to get together, and we were going to stay. We stayed at my friend Dave's house, and with Dave's parents, the 5 of us went over to the Lehigh Valley Mall, and I was like, we were going to talk about, hey, Twisted Sister's got these other 2 albums, which none of us had ever heard yet. We hadn't heard this one, which that's not the original copy I had. I picked that up many years later. But anyway, and we never heard You Can't Stop Rock and Roll. And so my buddy Mike picks up Under the Blade. Dave gets You Can't Stop Rock and Roll. And I'm like, yeah, but what am I going to get? I want to get something new and fresh, man. So give me something new. Well, I think it was Dave that told me, said, I was reading about this band in Hit Parader and Circus called W.A.S.P. I really think you might like them. I was like, oh yeah. Okay. Bring it. So at the time, Lehigh Valley Mall had 3 record stores. You had Listening Booth, and then you had a Listening Booth Plus or something. It was in the lower level, and then on the other end of it you had wall-to-wall sound. So we're looking, and Listening Booth didn't have it. Listening Booth downstairs didn't have it. Wall-to-wall sound had it. So I'm like, all right. I'm looking at this cover. I'm like, ooh, this looks interesting. So all right, plunk down the money for it. I think I also got Kiss analyzed too that same night too, but nice. Being a Kiss fan most of my life too. But so we took turns with our tapes. So we went Under the Blade first, and we were like, oh my gosh, I didn't know Twisted Sister could sound like this. You Can't Stop Rocking. Oh my gosh. Compared to Stay Hungry, those were killer albums. Yeah, Stay Hungry was good, but you could definitely tell they lightened up a little bit.
Right.
Then it was my turn. And I'm like, okay, I'm hooked. As soon as Tony Richards hit that snare beat, man, I was hooked. And I know my cassette got warped because it wouldn't play anymore. So I do know that for a fact. But yeah, I wore this thing out. And then I eventually I had money, and I eventually managed to buy myself the Animal single with that lovely cover that eventually my mom found in my room and was not really happy about, but she didn't let me get rid of it, but she wasn't happy about it. But I was like, well, hey. So that was where it started for me. It was late January 1985. So unfortunately I didn't get right on there as soon as the album came out, but man, as soon as that album hit, I hit that tape deck, I was hooked. So
nice.
That was where my history started with it. So so now one thing I'm going to talk about here is I'm going to kind of mention just a little background history for anybody who has never heard this album and is tuning into my channel and tuning into this series, but you're not that familiar with the history of this. So a little backdrop. Blackie gets into the New York Dolls after Johnny Thunder leaves, and Blackie finishes the tour. So then the New York Dolls break up. Blackie joins up with Arthur Kane, the bass player from the New York Dolls, and they head out to Los Angeles. They do the Killer Kane album. You hear one of the songs called Mr. Cool, which would eventually show up as Cries of the Night on Last Command, and would go through a few different versions in subsequent bands. Arthur Kane decides to head back to New York City. Blackie stays in LA. He forms Sister, which has, of course, you have the pentagrams on the kick drums, and a lot of that imagery that eventually would go towards Motley Crue's early imagery. That's where Randy Piper, I think, was originally a part of Sister. Sister breaks up. You get Circus Circus. Circus Circus eventually dissolves. He briefly joins London, which pretty much everybody in LA has been in London.
Yes.
And then he eventually starts W.A.S.P up, where you get Blackie, you get Randy Piper, Tony Richards, and Rick Fox. Originally was like the original kind of lineup. Of course, Rick Fox eventually leaves and goes to Steeler with Ron Keel and Yngwie Malmsteen. And supposedly it was also the same guy who came up with the W.A.S.P name, supposedly.
Right.
Chris and Randy apparently corroborate that story. So you have, and then you get a couple of lineup changes. Don Casso's in the band, and eventually Chris Holmes gets in there. Blackie goes to bass, and then the rest is history. You get one of the things that I can't wait to hear next year is, Blackie talks about in the meet and greets how this album was demoed at least four times or so, and like the second or third time, some of the stuff he was listening to just sounded absolutely vicious.
Right.
And I'm thinking, how can you get more vicious than this? I can only imagine. And I think I even heard him really praising Tony Richards and both Randy Piper for their background vocals. Those guys could really sing. And I almost want to say he really was lamenting at having to ditch Tony because of his substance abuse or his abuse issues. So I feel like I'm kind of glad I heard that at some point. So eventually Steve Riley would join on. But so how does the album do across the world? So Canada peaks at number 56, goes gold. In Finland, peaks at number 6, also goes gold. Sweden peaks at 15. In the UK, peaked at 51. Here in the United States, it only peaked at 74. Goes gold though. Japan goes gold. There were, of course, you have the Animal single, which that peaked at about 83 in the UK. Obviously didn't peak here. I Want to Be Somebody never charted here in the States, but it peaked at 77 in the UK. New Zealand, Rock and Metal Connection, Steve Deluxe. Hey, you guys know something in there. Peaked at number 30. School Days is a second single, which I thought was kind of an interesting choice. Peaks at 81 in the UK and 14 in Finland. Finland obviously loves W.A.S.P for whatever reason. That's pretty cool. I never knew that. Anyway, so you have this enormous, crazy stage show, which I wish I could have go back in time to see that stage show, which you can kind of see a little bit of it in this little movie right here, Dungeon Master. For any of you who like horror movies or good cheesy horror movies, W.A.S.P appears in that with the Tormentor song, and you get the girl on the rack. Man, I would have liked to have seen that. I would have liked to have been hit in the head with the raw meat, and then watch Blackie with the blood out of the skull kind of thing. I would have loved to have seen that old stage show, but yeah, a little too young for that. But anyway, so you have this crazy stage show that they became very well known for. Of course, they wanted to put the album out with Animal. Capitol says, yeah, you're not going to get in the major retailers with that, so let's kind of scrub that one off. They get to do it through Music for Nations, and you get the incredible B-side of Show No Mercy. But yes, so the album comes out on Capitol. I saw a couple of dates, I think in August. I think there was another one, maybe September, maybe here in the States.
Okay.
But what a ridiculous, I mean, just what a great album. John, I'm gonna let you take it away. Give me your thoughts on this album and let me hear what you think.
Well, before I go into the album, there you mentioned something, and I have these. I'm sure you have these regrets, and a lot of people watching have these regrets as well. Concerts we wish we would have saw. And when I was 13, 14 years old, I was listening to radio all the time. They always advertised the shows that were coming up. And one of the shows, one of the tours was W.A.S.P was the headliner, Metallica second, and Armored Saints was the opener. And they pushed this show. They were playing a local club. I'm going to say it was in Pittston, which was 20 minutes from where I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
I was 13, 14 years old. I mean, I hadn't, my first concert was summer of 85. It was Motley Crue and Loudness, but that was in Allentown.
I was there.
Were you?
Yes.
Wow.
I was there.
Nice. And my friend drove because I wasn't old enough to drive yet, but that was my first show, Motley Crue and Loudness.
Awesome.
That's cool.
We were at the same concert and we didn't know it. Oh well.
That wasn't your first though, was it?
No, that wasn't my first concert, but no, my first concert, ironically enough, was the Stray Cats.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's awesome. I love the Stray Cats.
Yeah, my brother did. He took me, so yeah. But
oh, great story. Gosh.
yeah,
I love the Stray Cats to this day. Anyway, but I wish I would have saw that tour. And but I wouldn't have been able to drive. Who would have took me then?
Yeah.
I don't think my friend who took me to the Motley Crue show would have took me to that one. I mean, I don't even know if it was a 18 or over type thing or what it was, but you'd hear that show advertised all the time. And that was right when I was discovering the other bands, Metallica and Armored Saint at the same time. I discovered Metallica on Ride the Lightning, and then they broke with Master. But
yeah.
But anyway, that's a show that I wish I would have saw. But
I remember seeing an advert, and I think in the paper for that show. Now that I think about it,
yeah, I don't remember the name of the club though. If anybody out there knows, please put in the comments. But yeah, I don't remember the name of the club. I don't think it was the Staircase. I think the Staircase came later because W.A.S.P actually played at the Staircase in the early 2000s. That's another regret. I didn't see that show. And at that point, I wasn't seeing much live music. Someone I worked with later told me about that, and I was like, I'm gonna say it was around 2002. But anyway, at that point, I couldn't see the show, but I still had this cassette. And to this day, I think this is one of the most impressive hard rock heavy metal debuts. I think most of the songs still really hold up. I mean, you do have some songs with lyrical content that's a little questionable, but the energy, the passion, the songs were strong. They were anthems. And as you had pointed out, John, when you went to the meet and greet last year with Blackie, yes, those background vocals are excellent on there, and they really drive these songs. Tony Richards was an excellent drummer. I don't know if they ever got that back. Although, to be fair, I forget the name of the drummer that's with them now. He's a machine. And
Achilles Priester.
Okay, thank you. Yes. He is a machine. I mean, when we saw them live at different shows, of course, yeah, he really brought the energy and he didn't miss a beat.
Nope.
But this album, I mean, when you look at this track list, I mean, everything here is very, very solid. I mean, there's not a clunker here. I want to be some. Now we're talking the original album. Later on, they put Animal on here, and they put a cover of the Rolling Stones Paint It Black on here, and I believe they put Show No Mercy, which was the B-side to Animal, as you mentioned. Uh, but it's just these anthems on here are spectacular. I want to be somebody. I mean, when you're 13, 14 years old, this is something you can relate to.
Yep.
It goes on throughout your life sometimes when the chips are down. But you know, when you're a teenager, this is how you feel. Love Machine, you know, it's a little more risque, but it was a very memorable chorus with the LOVE. So,
yep.
The Flame. That was probably my favorite song on the album when I first heard it. It was just a song about passion and living life to the fullest. It was a great song. B.A.D. That's another great track. All this album's full of anthems. Later on, Blackie's songwriting became a lot more serious. He went into a lot of different topics. He really matured as a songwriter. That maturity wasn't here yet, but at the same time, he knew how to write an anthem that would grab your attention when you were in ninth grade.
Yes.
Or eighth grade. So, but I mean, you see these songs there, just excellent. I mean, the guitar solos, I mean, they really fit the songs. I mean, I thought Chris Holmes is a wonderful player at his best. I mean, I don't think he doesn't get mentioned enough. I think we know him more for his outside of the show antics than we do musically. But he was a wonderful player. I mean, I'm not going to say he's one of the best guitar players ever, but his guitar playing really fit the sound. It really fit his band. But B.A.D. was another cool tune. School Days was fantastic. And another great anthem, another great chorus too. And I love the background vocals during the chorus on this song. I mean, that's the one thing. I mean, these songs, I mean, they weren't polished. They were really raw. Like if you listen to what else was out there in this genre at the time, you had Rats Out of the Cellar, you had Dawkins, Tooth and Nail, you had Twisted Sister, Stay Hungry, to mention a few. Those were a little, as great as those albums are, they were a little more polished. There was no polish here. I'm not saying it was raw to the point that it was recorded in a tin can or something, or it had a lousy demo production. It's not like that. Right. But the production fit the songs. You didn't want to spice this up too much. You want to keep it as is. And the performances on here are stellar. Now, all those songs here, I mean, to this day, those songs still sound very good and fresh. That was another thing. I'm talking about production. The production's aged well. I mean, even on some of the later albums, I think when they were a little more polished, it didn't have that production that screamed 1980s. You didn't hear drums that were tinny and not too many effects, things like that. The albums still sound fresh today.
Right.
If we go into the second half of the album, Hellion kicks ass. I mean, Hellion is just wonderful. Another, I can't recite lyrics too much on this album like I used to be able to back then. I think I saw in the bridge. There's a great lyric on there, and I used to see
the gods you worship are still at the altar of rock and roll. You kneel. Yeah. Now I've lost the second half, but
It
yeah.
was those. It was just those two lines, though.
Yeah.
But you'd see that in posters, and
Yeah.
you'd see it in one-page ads for the album. So yeah, Hellion, they were playing a lot early on. There we go.
You can't see it, but it's right up at the top there. It's the gods you worship are steel. At the altar of rock and roll you kneel. It's actually right on the top of the back of the cover of
There
the
you
album.
go.
So sorry.
That's all good. That's all good. Sleeping in a Fire, this song really brings out how much of a great a vocalist Blackie was. One of
Mm-hmm.
the best in the genre, in my opinion. I mean, he didn't sound like anybody else. I mean, as soon as you heard Blackie Lawless's voice, you knew it was him.
Yep.
You weren't going to confuse him with anyone else. Whereas some of these vocalists were a little interchangeable at that time, but some of them had their own signature style, and Blackie certainly did. And he can go high. Some of his screams will go right through you.
Oh,
That was right from the outset.
yep.
Sleeping in a Fire is a wonder. It's I call it a ballad. It's closest thing to a ballad on the album,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just very mellow in the verses, and then great chorus again.
Yep.
Choruses on this album are so great. Um, another wonderful track. On Your Knees, Heavy as Sin. Um, there's another one with some risque lyrics in there, but the
Mm-hmm.
thing is, when you're young, you're not really listening. I didn't listen to the lyrics as much when I was younger. I was more into the music. I could recite a few lyrics, and even if I could, it may have sounded like it's like if you read these lyrics now, you're like, oh, but back then you didn't really think about that. I
Right.
mean, you didn't you didn't think that they were harmful. They could be harmful to someone else, but back then, yeah, that's how it felt back then. Like now, yeah, maybe some of them haven't aged very well, but that was a killer track. Again, the drums on there, spectacular. The delivery, awesome. Great track. Torment Tormentor was a little slower. So from it was what I understand, this was I read an interview with Blackie back then, and he said there were certain songs that resonated better in Europe than they did in the States, and one of them was Tormentor
Mm-hmm.
because it was just a slower. It wasn't an anthem at all. It was just slower and more atmospheric, and it would just grab you in. The chorus is just them saying tormentor over and over, but it's a
Yeah.
very strong. It's probably my least favorite track on the album, but I still like it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then Torture Never Stops closes the original album, and fantastic closer. I love the guitar riff on this.
Yep.
um you cry but no one hears or cares. Just
And
that
holds
whole
the ropes that keeps you tied in knots. Yep.
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 Yeah,
That good stuff.
it is absolutely. So yeah, underrated debut album, I think, in the hard rock genre. And you were talking about how that charted 74 in the States. Yeah, back then with a lot of these albums, they had these slow burns. Like
Mm-hmm.
they wouldn't chart high, but a year or two later, they'd eventually go gold. Dawkins Tooth and Nail was the same way. It was always back then. I was following the Billboard charts a lot. You
Yeah.
always saw these albums like bubbling under. They were always in the 80s and 90s, and they didn't really have any hits. And meanwhile, Twisted Sister and Rat and Motley Crue a little earlier, they exploded because they had a hit or they had a big video.
Right. Right.
Um, but these albums, and Alone Again eventually helped Tooth and Nail sell, but that was like the third or fourth single off the album, so it took a while. This was the same way in the fact it just had this slow burn. It was a lot of word of mouth with this band.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they weren't gonna really open in the States with the material here as much as we loved it. It wasn't going to get to that next level. You're not going to hear I Want to Be Somebody on your top 40 stations or anything like that, or
No.
your AOR stations at that point. I mean, AOR wasn't really into metal much at all at that point. But this is a wonderful album, though. And the foundation to what's been a very good career. I mean, Blackie Lawless has become a wonderful songwriter over the years. His passion really shines through in everything he does. He doesn't.
It does.
I mean, there might be albums that weren't as good. Maybe he was repeating some of the same ideas, but you knew he always believed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I feel about this one. I gotta pick up a CD for it, admittedly. But yeah.
If you were to like a 3 out of 5 or a 9 out of 10 or something like that, what would you give it?
Ooh, probably I'd give it a 9. I don't know if I'd give it a 10, but I'd say 9.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. So for me, as I think back to those early memories of getting to listen to this thing for the first time with my friends Mike and Dave. So and I got to make sure I share these with both those guys, because they are gonna freak out that I'm I'm name dropping them here. But again, I Want to Be Somebody with that there's such a positive message in the song.
Mm-hmm.
And yet this you see all the things that clouded the band with, this violent looking imagery, but yet you listen to I Want to Be Somebody, and that's a really uplifting, positive type of song. Even at age 53, I still say I want to be somebody.
Mm-hmm.
God, I want to be somebody. As he heard, as the story goes, he was watching Barney Miller and Ron Detective Harris had a book signing he was supposed to go do. Well, a call comes in. Well, he's got to do that call, and Barney wants him to do that call, and he says, God, I just want to be somebody. And there's a lot of people that think that, and he's right.
Mm-hmm.
40, almost 40 years later, at age 53, I still say I want to be somebody. But great guitar solo. Chris Holmes is just all over that with his that frenetic style of his, but yet it was just tasty enough. Yeah, it was a little speedy. Yeah, it was a little wild, but it was still tasty, and it still worked. And like you said, it worked. It was a great rock and roll riff song to that.
Mm-hmm.
Love Machine, again, with those pounding drums of Tony Richards. And again, the guitar solos, Randy Piper and Chris Holmes really were a tandem that just, I would love to have seen them do a lot more than those 2 albums. That would have been so good. But Love Machine, again, you get that pulsing drum tribal beat that Tony just did so well. The Flame, it was really good to hear The Flame this past tour, in that little opening medley. That was
right.
It was great to hear that. I was like, sometimes it wasn't always a great song. But it had there was a brightness to that song.
Yes.
Until the flame burns out. And you're right. The passion and the fire, that was what fueled that song. And it was another, just a great song. B.A.D., another one with that Tony Richards tribal beat. Really just talking about, what kind of addictions you're kind of a slave to, more or less. That's, I always thought, I don't know what BAD actually stands for. Maybe it stands for booze and drugs.
Maybe.
I don't know, but it's that those always seem to be kind of what they allude to. And I think maybe even sex maybe could be thrown in there too. But either way, it was still a pretty strong song. And again, I can't stress this enough. I love Tony Richards on this album. My gosh, it was like, that was one of the first things I noticed about The Last Command was the drums didn't sound as punchy, I guess. Right. Not to knock Steve Riley, because I know he's a good drummer and he has his own style, but it just, maybe it fit those songs better, but man, I missed that there was something about Tony's sound that I missed. But anyway, we'll get to that when we get to Last Command. But School Days, again, so many of those lyrics, a fire bell is ringing hell, and I just want to see him blaze. Again, as kids, how many times did we go out for a fire drill and hope that the school is really burning down? Come on. I probably dreamed of it many a time. Again, another great rock and roll track. You have a nice slow spot in this with the solo, builds back up to that great anthemic chorus. Of course, you got the kids saying the Pledge of Allegiance in the beginning, which was maybe a little hokey, but that's okay. It works. But again, a barn burning first side. You flip it over. You start off with Hellion, and again that tribal beat. Again, and not that they're playing anything ridiculous on the guitars. It's just that but you get this swelling atmosphere that, oh boy, here we go. Wild child, you're sweating in your stones. The alcohol you down makes you. And I know that's not the first verse. I realized I jumped the verse. But anyway, you get that great atmosphere. It's like, oh yeah, he's telling a story about a character here. It could be any one of us, really. It's out there. Those people are out there, and those are the people you want to party with. Those are the ones you want to hang out with. Yes. Sleeping in the Fire. The thing I remember the most about Sleeping in the Fire, as the three of us were listening to this for the first time, and I remember it was my friend Mike. He was looking at us. He goes, "Man, I think these guys are devil worshippers." I was like, I didn't care. It was a great song. It was the first W.A.S.P song I learned on guitar.
Nice.
I took it. I was just starting to play guitar, and I took it to my teacher, and he did a little something different with me with it. He for all you guitar players out there who could be watching this, he had me tune my low E string down to D, and he gave me a totally different arrangement to play it on than how it's actually done. On record, it's tuned down a half a step for all the musician people out there. So, but this one, he just had me tune my E string down to D, and he taught me a totally different way. And it sounds really cool when you listen to that. I need to learn how to play that and sing it like in that key. But Sleeping in the Fire, just such a great ballad, one of my favorite songs off the album. I still love it to this day. I don't know if we'll go into the live albums or not. I kind of feel like I got to talk about Live in the Raw because that's an awesome album. So I'll leave what I think about Sleeping in the Fire on that one for then. On Your Knees, again, Playing with Fire, Lust in You Burns, the flames in playing with fire, lust in you burns, the reflecting the flames in your eyes. It's just again, maybe talking about what the kind of things you're involved in, what can maybe addictions or just what you're giving your worship to type of thing. I don't know. But either way, it's a strong song. And again, it's been their set opener for a long time. Again, it was great to hear live. Tormentor, to me, actually, I'm a little different. I'm Tormentor's kind of in that mid-range for me. I as far as my favorites go, I always liked that song. And it actually birthed a song of my own because I was writing a lot of lyrics back in high school. And it actually birthed a song of my own, which is so blatant. It's such a blatant W.A.S.P ripoff that if you ever heard the track, you'd think, oh gosh, yeah, that's really bad. But the song was called Sadist. And in the Tormentor song, let's see, where does it come up? Let's see. I am a sinner. I kiss the breast. I am a sadist that whips the flesh. And so that chorus, ding, ding, I wrote this song called Sadist. And the lyric imagery is very, very much a ripoff of this of this first W.A.S.P album. There's so much there that I think even the opening chords are almost kind of like Hellion style a little bit. So but it's really bad. But again, anybody who watches Dungeon Master, you'll know that Tormentor shows up in that with a slightly different set of lyrics too. But I love the atmosphere, which we would come to love in later albums because W.A.S.P would have those atmospheric songs. You know, we get some really good ones, and Tormentor to me is one of those. Of course, the album ends off with The Torture Never Stops, and you think, oh, they're going to let off the break. No. You get this chugging, almost Iron Maiden like riff, this galloping riff kind of thing. And again, just this great ending track. So good to hear that live in that first medley. Like I said in the concert review, the only things they really cut out of those songs was the guitar solo and the outros.
That's true.
You got all the verses, you just didn't get the guitar solos and the outros, which really that's all these songs were. There was like verse, chorus, verse, bridge, solo, outro, and that's pretty much it. You didn't really get another verse after the guitar solo, except maybe Tormentor repeats a verse, but you don't really get an extra verse after the guitar solos because it just goes right into the outro and it fades right out. Because a lot of these songs, I mean, the album clocks in at 38 minutes. So about 3-4 minutes per song. So you don't have these crazy epics or nothing like that. So right. you could get away with doing those medleys, and maybe you want to hear the guitar solos, but it still worked. You still got the meat of the song for the most part. So all that to say, it was great to hear it. It's a great ending track. As far as Animal, I loved it when I was 15. And I marked out when it started playing, when they played it live. I haven't been into the song for a long time, but I just before I got on here, I listened to the album again. I wanted to listen through the album again, and I have this reissue where it has Animal and Show No Mercy and Painted Black, and I listened to Animal, and I had my headphones on, and I'm just like, this really is a good song, actually. Lyrically, okay, maybe maybe it's not that good, but musically, this is actually a pretty good, hooky, catchy song. I could still appreciate it for what it is. Well, I'm just not crazy about the lyrics anymore. Show No Mercy, though, powerful B-side. I always loved that track. Loved playing that just as much as I liked playing Animal when I would get the single. For me, the clunker is Painted Black. By the time Show No Mercy's done, I just cut the album off. I don't even bother with Painted Black. It's okay, but I'm just like, I could actually do without that one. So that, to me, that's the only song that was a B-side that I could have done without. But for me, this is probably like my second favorite album of the band. I probably would give this easily a 9.5 to a 10, easily. It's just, it still holds up. I still love this album so much. And I probably will always, every time I listen to it in the car, I'm just like, it just pumps me up so much. So, again, great album. I do want to throw one little extra thing in here. Let's just talk about our good friend, Martin Popoff.
Yes.
Now, I'm not going to read the review here, but he gave this a rating of 5. And yet he gives other albums, he gave 2 other albums that came out in the 80s by W.A.S.P. a 7, but everything else pretty much a 5. So Martin, if you ever watch this, I kind of would like to know if you still are feeling the same way about this album or not. Anyway, so a little love to Martin Popoff there, but this was the beginning of a soundtrack to my life that I got to thank Blackie for, because really W.A.S.P. has been the most part a soundtrack to my life, and you will get more into those stories as we move on through the discography. But so with that said, John, do you have any extra thoughts you want to throw out there regarding this album?
Yes, thank you, John. As you were talking, I was thinking of other things on this album. I love the way Tormentor ends because it's very mid-tempo, and
Mm-hmm.
at the end it becomes a runaway train. And some of those kamikaze solos at the end when it goes into that last riff, which is a total change, total tempo change. It just goes, whereas the beginning gets very atmospheric and mid tempo. So that's a
Mm-hmm.
wonderful ending to a song. And the
Mm-hmm.
same thing, and Sleeping in the Fire, it keeps that same tempo, but the solos at the end are wonderful. They add a lot to that song.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, so that's something that came to my mind as we were talking here. Like those, don't they end those songs as good as those songs are? They end even better.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I
I mean, I'm
I
done.
would agree with that. So is there a song from this that we wish we could have seen live from this album that we didn't get? Because we did get about half the album, kind of, sort of.
I would have loved. We didn't get Hellion here.
We didn't either.
Yeah, and I know they did that on the tour early on. I would have loved to heard Hellion live.
I would have been good with Hellion. I would have been good with Sleeping in the Fire. Um, yeah, those probably would have been the only two. I think
Yeah,
everything else I would have been fine, but I think if they were going to do Tormentor, then you got to pull the rack out. And
that's true.
I don't think Blackie's wanting to do that. I don't think that's I
No,
don't think that's his thing. I don't think he wants to get into that. And I don't think School Days really would kind of translate too well anymore. And but
no,
I think Hellion and Sleeping in the Fire would have been certainly ones I would have liked to have seen. But yeah, just to watch the crowd go ballistic for it. But
absolutely.
man, what a kickoff to Wasp Wednesday. Um, folks, for those watching this, tell me your thoughts about this first album. What did you think about it? Um, please like, share, subscribe. You know all the YouTube lingo. You're going to be seeing us. You're going to be seeing us doing this for a little while here. So get used to seeing our mugs talk about some classic Wasp albums as we keep going here. Um, after this one, we're going to talk Last Command, and then we'll go in from there out. So, with that being said, John, the music, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
I am Johnny Metal, John Clauser, the Metal Dad, as I've been lovingly called, coming to you from my music corner of the world. Thank you for tuning in. Tune in next week. We're going to go into The Last Command.